the most successful woman in Vancouver, was walking through the November rain. Like someone who had forgotten where home was supposed to be. Celeste Drummond had everything she had spent 30 years building. A glass and steel tower on Georgia Street carried her company's name. 300 employees called her by her first name and meant it respectfully. Her penthouse looked out over the inlet where the North Shore Mountains disappeared into cloud. She had been profiled in Report on Business. She had been asked to speak at fundraising galas, where the flowers cost more than some people's monthly rent. None of it felt the way she had imagined it would. Not since the accident. 22 months earlier, the Trans-Canada Highway had been slick with October ice, when a transport truck crossed the center line and took everything from her. Her husband Noel, and her daughter, Piper, who had been 17 and laughed like a bell and had never once been afraid of anything. Since that night, Celeste had not truly stopped. She attended board meetings, she signed acquisitions. She shook hands and smiled, the particular smile that cost her nothing on the outside because it cost her everything inside. But somewhere between the hospital waiting room and the double funeral and the months that followed, the person who had built all of this had gone very quiet. She still showed up. She just didn't live there anymore. Her therapist called it survival mode. She called it Tuesday. That particular Tuesday was cold enough that the rain felt like a threat. She had left Dr. Singh's office on Howe Street with no particular intention of walking home. Her driver Curtis was waiting 3 blocks east. But she had told him she needed air and turned south instead. The holiday lights along Robson Street reflected off the wet pavement in long smeared streaks of red and gold. Someone was selling roasted chestnuts from a cart near the library. She could smell them. She was thinking about nothing in particular, which was the closest she came to peace anymore, when something small and fast came around the corner and hit her squarely in the chest. Celeste grabbed a lamppost to keep from falling. The someone grabbed her coat with both hands and didn't let go. It was a girl, 8 years old maybe, small even for that. Her hair was dark brown and soaked flat against her face. She wore a red fleece jacket with a broken zipper, jeans with a tear at the knee, running shoes that were the wrong season for November in Vancouver by a wide margin. She was shaking, not the cold kind of shaking, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper. She looked up at Celeste with eyes that were enormous and terrified and calculating all at once. The face of a child who had already learned to size up adults before trusting them with anything. Please. Her voice was barely loud enough to hear over the rain. Please pretend you're my grandmother, just for a minute, please. Celeste did not move. The girl's hands tightened on her coat. There are people behind me, I just need a minute, please. A month ago, a year ago, Celeste would have asked the reasonable questions. She would have assessed before committing. She had built a company on exactly that kind of measured judgment. But something about the child's face, that exhausted, terrified, still hoping face, bypassed every careful instinct she had left. She looked over the girl's shoulder. 2 men were coming fast down the sidewalk, heavy coats, lanyards swinging, breath steaming in the cold. One of them had a radio on his hip, the other pointed. Hey, stop her. Celeste put her arms around the girl. Not gently, firmly, the way you hold someone who is about to fall. There you are, she said. Her voice came out steady and warm, entirely invented. I've been looking everywhere, sweetheart. The men slowed, one of them stepped closer. Ma'am, that girl is with us, she ran off from supervised care. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Celeste said. We have documentation. So do I. She had nothing except her presence and 30 years of standing in rooms where men assumed she would back down. My granddaughter had an appointment this afternoon. I was late picking her up. I apologize for the confusion. The taller man pulled out a phone. The girl buried her face against Celeste's shoulder. Her whole body was vibrating. Her name is... Her name, Celeste said very quietly, is none of your business until I have spoken with your supervisor, your legal representative, and my own family lawyer in that order. She reached into her coat pocket and produced a business card. The one with the company logo and the title beneath it, Chief Executive Officer. The men looked at the card, then at each other. There may have been a miscommunication, the shorter one said. There may have been, Celeste agreed. I'll see it gets sorted. They left. She did not watch them go. She kept her arms around the girl until their footsteps faded into the rain. Then she pulled back just enough to look at the child's face. My name is Celeste, and yours? Mia, the girl whispered. Mia, are you hurt? A head shake, but she didn't let go of the coat. Curtis's black SUV turned the corner right on schedule because Curtis always did. Celeste raised one hand, he slowed. I know a hotel 2 blocks from here, she said. It's warm, there's food. I won't take you anywhere you don't want to go. But if those men come back, the street isn't safe. She paused. Do you want to come with me? Mia looked at her for a long, careful moment. Whatever she was measuring, she seemed to find enough of it. "Okay," she said. The suite at the hotel was too large and too quiet, the way expensive rooms always were, as though silence was something you could purchase by the square foot. Celeste had Curtis bring up hot soup, bread, sliced pears, a thermos of hot chocolate. She found a spare sweatshirt in her overnight bag and gave it to Mia, who accepted it the way children accept things from adults they don't yet trust. Quickly, without quite looking at the gift. She sat on the edge of the sofa, the sweatshirt came to her knees. Celeste sat across from her. She didn't push. She had learned from watching Piper that children answered questions when they were ready, and not a moment before. Mia stared at the hot chocolate. "You should drink it," Celeste said. "It won't disappear." Mia looked up. "How do you know?" It was a serious question. Celeste answered it seriously. "Because I ordered it and I'll order another if it does." Something shifted in the girl's face, just slightly. The way frost shifts when a warm current of air passes under a door. She picked up the mug. After a few minutes she said quietly, to the mug rather than to Celeste, "They're going to move my brother tomorrow morning." Celeste kept her voice even. "Tell me about your brother." Mia's name for him was always just Caleb said, with the particular gravity children reserve for people who are irreplaceable. He was 15. He had been at Ridgemont Youth Residence for the same 8 months she had, since their mother's overdose and their father's disappearance before that. A word Mia used without drama, the way children name things that have simply always been true. "He got into a fight," she said. "But it wasn't like they said." She pressed her lips together. "There's a man there, Mr. Fogarty, who works the night shift. He took my notebook, the one where I draw. He said kids at Ridgemont don't get personal property unless they earn it. Caleb saw and he told Fogarty to give it back." Her voice went flat and careful. "Fogarty pushed him. Caleb pushed back. That's what happened." "And what did Ridgemont say happened?" "They said Caleb was violent. They said he has a pattern. They said they're transferring him to a corrective intervention program in the interior." She said those last 3 words the way adults had clearly said them to her. Each syllable official and final. "It's 5 hours away. I won't be able to see him." She reached into the front pocket of her jeans and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it carefully. The way you handle something irreplaceable. It was a drawing, pencil on notebook paper, well creased from being carried. 2 figures standing under a tree with a leaf shape that might have been a maple. Underneath in block letters, "Still here." "He drew this for me," Mia said. "When they told us we'd be at separate facilities at first. He put it in my hand and said no matter what, the paper means I'm still here." She smoothed a crease with her thumb. "I've had it for 8 months." Celeste looked at the drawing for a long time. She thought of Piper. Of a drawing on the refrigerator door that had been there so long she'd stopped seeing it. A purple horse with 6 legs, made in grade 2. Never taken down because it had made her laugh and she'd forgotten she had kept it for that reason. She had not thought about that drawing in 22 months. Now it was in front of her eyes so clearly she could count every leg. "What is Caleb like?" she asked. Her voice came out slightly rougher than she intended. Mia thought about this. "He's the kind of person who notices things," she said finally. "Like if you stop eating he asks why before anyone else does, and he remembers what you tell him. I said once that I hate thunder because it sounds like something breaking. Now every time there's a storm he tells me a story loud enough that I can't hear it." She refolded the drawing. "They call him difficult because he asks questions. But he only asks questions because no one answers them." Celeste stood. "I need to make a phone call," she said. "And then we're going to figure out what happens to Caleb." Mia looked at her the way children look at promises, with desperate hope and the particular bracing of a person who has been disappointed before. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," said Celeste, "that's why I'm going to." She called Dominique Reeves at 9:20 on a Tuesday evening. Dominique had been her corporate lawyer for 9 years and picked up on the second ring because she always did, which was one of the reasons Celeste had never considered working with anyone else. "I need you tonight," Celeste said. "Not tomorrow, tonight. Bring whatever you need to stop a 15-year-old from being transferred out of province by morning." A pause, not hesitation. "Assessment. Address?" Dominique said. By midnight they had a picture of Ridgemont Youth Residence. That was considerably less cheerful than its website suggested. Dominique worked through her network. A former colleague in family law. A contact at the Ministry of Children and Family Development. A journalist named Priya who covered social services for the Globe. By the time they had finished cross-referencing complaint records, Ridgemont had a pattern. Older children labeled as behavioral risks within weeks of intake. Younger, easier to place children moved quickly through the system. Siblings separated without documented psychological assessment. Caleb's transfer paperwork had been filed on the same day Mia's foster placement application was updated. That was not a coincidence. Mia had fallen asleep on the sofa sometime around 11, still holding the folded drawing. Celeste draped a blanket over her and turned the lamp down. She stood at the window watching rain move across Burrard Inlet and felt something she had not felt in 22 months. Not grief, not the numb maintenance of grief, something older and harder and more directional than grief. Purpose. Ridgemont Youth Residence was on a side street in East Van behind a chain-link fence whose cheerful blue sign, "A Place to Grow," was rusting at the screws. The building was concrete block institutional, the kind of architecture that communicated immediately that whoever designed it had thought about budget, long before thinking about the children who would live inside it. Celeste's car sat in the parking lot like a statement. Mia had refused to wait at the hotel. "He won't believe someone came for him unless he sees me," she'd said in a voice that allowed no further discussion. She was wearing the sweatshirt still, sleeves pushed to her elbows, the folded drawing in her front pocket. They went in together. The director of Ridgemont was a man named Victor Slade. Not a loud man, not a cruel-looking one. He was in his late 40s, wore a pressed collar and spoke in the calm, reasonable cadence of someone who had learned that the best way to close down concern was to sound more professional than the person expressing it. He smiled at Celeste with the particular expression of an administrator who had managed difficult situations before, and fully expected to manage this one. "Mrs. Drummond," he said, "I understand you have some concerns about one of our residents." "Where is Caleb?" Mia said. Victor Slade did not look at her. "Children in our care are receiving appropriate support. We don't typically allow." "I'd like to see Caleb," Celeste said. "He had a significant behavioral incident last week. We've been implementing a structured de-escalation protocol. I'd like to see him now." Victor Slade's smile didn't move, but something behind it went colder. He produced a tablet and opened a file. "I want to be transparent with you. Caleb has a documented pattern of volatility," his file indicates. "What did he do on October the 3rd specifically?" A pause, barely perceptible. "He became physically confrontational with a staff member." "Why?" Victor Slade turned a page on his tablet, the specifics of individual incidents. "I know the specifics," Celeste said. "A staff member confiscated his sister's property without cause. Caleb asked him to return it. The staff member made physical contact first. Caleb responded." She held his gaze. "I'd like you to show me, in your policy documents, where protecting a younger sibling from an adult's aggression constitutes a behavioral pattern warranting an out-of-province transfer." The room went quiet in the way of rooms that had never had to be that quiet before. Dominique stepped forward. "We're also requesting your intake documentation for both Miller siblings, your complaint log for the past 18 months, your staffing records for the October 3rd incident, and the transfer authorization for Caleb Miller, including the psychological assessment that should have accompanied it." Victor Slade's composure was still intact, but it was working considerably harder than before. "That documentation isn't available for external review without proper channels." "We've already filed for expedited family court review," Dominique said. "The judge will be available in 3 hours. These documents will be requested there as well. The question is whether you'd prefer to provide them willingly first." He looked at both of them. Then he looked at Mia. Really looked at her for what might have been the first time, and whatever he was used to seeing in children's faces, he was seeing something different in hers. Not fear, not deference, waiting. He called for a staff member. "Show them to the common room." Caleb was not in the common room. He was not in his room. He was not at breakfast, where 6 other children sat at a long table eating without speaking, with the careful stillness of children who had learned that being noticed at mealtimes could go either way. A young worker named Paula, 23, barely, caught Celeste's eye from across the room and held it for half a second too long. Then she looked at the corridor to her left. Celeste followed her gaze. The corridor went left toward laundry, then down a half-flight of stairs to a secondary level that smelled of mildew and cold concrete. The third door had a bolt on the outside. Celeste slid it open. The room was small and had no window, a single overhead bulb, a cot with a thin mattress. The temperature was several degrees lower than the floor above. Caleb was sitting with his back against the far wall, knees to his chest. He was tall for 15, with Mia's same dark coloring and a bruise along his jaw that was several days old. He had his arms wrapped around himself. He looked up when the door opened, and his eyes went through Celeste first, past her and found his sister. He was on his feet before Celeste could speak. "Mia." She ran to him. Celeste stood in the doorway and did not try to hold that moment. Some things needed to stay exactly as they were. He held her like someone who had been counting the hours. Mia had both arms around his ribs and was saying something too low to hear. Celeste caught one phrase. "I still have the drawing." After a moment, Caleb looked over his sister's head at Celeste. His face was careful and sore and trying very hard not to hope. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who knows what still here means," she said. Mia pulled back enough to look up at him. She stopped them. "She brought a lawyer." His jaw tightened. Celeste recognized the expression. She had worn it herself in the months after the accident. The look of someone who has wanted help for so long that the arrival of it feels almost more frightening than its absence. "They told Mia I'd already been transferred," he said. "I heard them say it." "You haven't been transferred anywhere," Celeste said. "And I have a judge reviewing your transfer order in approximately 2 hours. But first I need you to tell me everything. Not the version you thought no one would believe. The real version." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat back on the edge of the cot, pulled his sister down beside him and started to talk. He talked for nearly an hour. What emerged was larger than one facility and one director. Dominique made 12 calls before noon. Priya was outside Ridgemont's front entrance with a camera by mid-morning. A social policy advocate with contacts at the ministry had already begun pulling audit trails on 3 connected facilities. The complaint log Dominique obtained under legal compulsion showed 74 documented concerns over 27 months. 61 had been marked resolved within 48 hours, with no record of external follow-up. Victor Slade stopped being cooperative around 11:30. He resumed being very cooperative 40 minutes later, when Dominique read aloud from the psychological assessment that should have accompanied Caleb's transfer, the one that upon review did not appear to exist. By mid-afternoon the transfer order was suspended. By evening the Minister of Children and Family Development had been briefed by her deputy. By nightfall, 3 additional facilities connected to the same network of contracted operators had been flagged for provincial audit. Celeste sat in Dominique's car in the Ridgemont parking lot and looked at the chain-link fence and the cheerful sign rusting at its screws. She felt very tired and very awake at the same time, in the way of a person who has just finished something that was worth finishing. Mia was in the back seat, asleep against Caleb's shoulder. Caleb was not asleep. He was watching his sister's face, with the particular attention of someone who has spent months not being able to see it whenever he needed to. He noticed Celeste watching. "She told me what you said at the hotel," he said. "That you knew what still here meant." Celeste nodded. "What does it mean to you?" She thought about Piper's purple horse on the refrigerator. About 18 months of going through the motions of a life while the actual life stayed sealed somewhere behind glass, still and unreachable. "It means you don't disappear," she said. "Even when someone tells you that you have to." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then he looked back at his sister. "Thank you," he said, "for not walking past." The family court hearing was 4 months later. January in Vancouver, which meant rain instead of snow, and the mountains hidden behind low cloud and the particular gray light that made the city look like it was holding its breath. The courtroom was smaller than Celeste had expected. Dominique sat to her left. Mia sat between them wearing a new coat dark green, her hair in 2 braids she'd done herself that morning. She kept checking the door. Caleb came in with his caseworker, a woman named Bernadette, who had been reassigned after the audit, and who seemed, for the first time in either child's experience, to actually read files before attending meetings. He was wearing a navy shirt and looked both younger and older than 15. He found Mia's eyes immediately. She held up 3 fingers, the signal they had agreed on. "I'm okay." He held up 3 fingers back. Victor Slade was not in the room. He had resigned from Ridgemont in November and was under a separate administrative review. Paula, the young worker who had looked at the corridor and held Celeste's gaze for half a second too long, had given testimony that Dominique described, in her understated way, as decisive. The Honorable Judge Louise Garneau reviewed the documents with the focused attention of someone who had spent 30 years listening to children who had not been heard. She asked Celeste 3 questions. She asked Caleb 4. She asked Mia 1. "Do you understand what it means for Ms. Drummond to become your legal guardian, while the adoption process continues?" Mia placed the folded drawing on the table in front of her, the penciled maple tree, the 2 figures, the block letters, and looked at the judge. "It means she's still here," she said. Judge Garneau looked at the drawing. Something shifted in her face. She signed the papers. The courtroom didn't rise to its feet the way Celeste had imagined it might. It was quieter than that. Caleb put his hand over his sister's. Mia looked up at Celeste with a face that was too full for a single expression to contain. Celeste thought she should say something significant. She couldn't find anything that fit. She put her arms around both of them instead. The house on the west side had a room that had been Piper's. Celeste had not opened it in 22 months. The morning after the hearing she did. Mia stood in the doorway, not going in yet, looking. "Whose was this?" she asked. My daughters, Celeste said. Mia looked at her carefully. The kind of look that children give when they are deciding whether to say the thing they are actually thinking. What was she like? Was she like? She was afraid of nothing, Celeste said, and she laughed like she meant it. She paused. She would have liked you. Mia stepped into the room. Caleb found them there a little later, sitting on the floor, looking at a drawing still taped to the wall. A purple horse with 6 legs, made in grade 2, never taken down. He crouched down beside them and considered it with the serious attention of someone who takes art seriously. 6 legs, he said. She was 7, Celeste said. Still, he said, it's more interesting than a regular horse. The 3 of them sat with that for a while. Celeste established the Drummond Foundation the following spring. Small at first, staffed by Dominique and Priya and Bernadette and a board of people who had either lived through the system or spent careers trying to fix it. Its mandate was straightforward. No sibling pair separated for administrative convenience. No complaint closed without independent review. No child's fear renamed a behavior problem. Caleb designed the logo, 2 figures under a maple tree. Every November when the rain came off the Pacific and turned Vancouver's streets into long mirrors of blurred light, Celeste thought about a girl in a red fleece jacket running around a corner and hitting her in the chest. She had been walking back from a therapy session. She had been thinking about nothing in particular. She had been almost empty enough, finally, to be filled. The lesson did not come to her like a headline. It came slowly, the way most true things do. Over breakfasts and bedtimes and ordinary evenings when nothing significant was happening, except that 3 people were in the same room and none of them were alone. A child's love can be the most precise and demanding form of courage there is. A broken person can still be the right person. And sometimes the life that gives you back your reason for living arrives at a run, cold and soaking wet, asking only for 1 minute of pretending. The pretending, it turns out, is where the real thing begins.